The wind howled softly through the rows of weathered tombstones as Karen Willis tightened her grip on the rusted shovel. Her hands trembled, not just from the cold, but from something deeper, something she couldn't quite explain. It wasn't fear exactly, though that was part of it. No, this feeling went beyond fear. It was desperation, raw and unrelenting, clawing at her chest like a wild animal trying to break free. Karen stood alone in Willow Creek Cemetery, a place she had come to know too well over the past 6 months. This was where they had buried her daughter, Emily Willis. Emily, who had been so full of life, so determined to make a difference in the world. At only 22 years old, she had joined the military right after high school, driven by a sense of duty and purpose. Karen remembered the day Emily left for basic training, how proud she had felt, even if her heart ached at the thought of saying goodbye. But now, all that pride felt hollow. All those dreams felt shattered. Because Emily wasn't just gone, she was taken away. And no one would tell Karen why. The official report said it was an accident during a routine mission overseas. But what kind of accident leaves no body behind? What kind of accident results in nothing more than a folded flag and a box of personal belongings being delivered to a grieving mother's doorstep? The question swirled endlessly in Karen's mind, keeping her awake at night and dragging her down during the day. And then there were the whispers. It started with rumors among the townsfolk about strange lights appearing near the cemetery late at night. Some claimed to have seen shadowy figures moving between the graves, while others swore they heard faint voices carried on the wind. At first, Karen dismissed these stories as nonsense, the kind of superstitious talk that always seemed to crop up around places like this. But when she began noticing things herself, the way the air felt heavier near Emily's grave, the inexplicable chill that ran down her spine whenever she visited, it became harder to ignore. Tonight, she decided, was the night she would get answers. Karen glanced around nervously, making sure no one else was nearby. The cemetery was silent except for the occasional rustle of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. She knew she shouldn't be here, knew that digging up a grave was illegal, maybe even sacrilegious, but none of that mattered anymore. Not when every fiber of her being screamed that something was wrong. Taking a deep breath, Karen plunged the shovel into the soft earth. The sound of metal scraping against dirt echoed loudly in the stillness, making her flinch. For a moment, she froze, half expecting someone to appear out of the darkness and stop her. But when nothing happened, she forced herself to keep going. Each thrust of the shovel sent waves of pain shooting through her arms and back. Karen wasn't used to physical labor like this, but she didn't care. She pushed through the discomfort, driven by a singular focus: to uncover the truth. As the hole grew deeper, her movements became more frantic. Dirt flew in all directions, some of it landing on her clothes and face. By the time she hit something solid, she was drenched in sweat despite the chilly night air. Leaning down, Karen brushed away the loose soil with her hands, revealing the wooden surface of a coffin. Her heart pounded wildly in her chest as she stared at it, unsure whether to feel relief or dread. Relief because she hadn't imagined the entire thing, and dread because she had no idea what she might find inside. With trembling fingers, she pried open the lid. At first, all she saw was darkness. Then, as her eyes adjusted, she realized the coffin was empty. There was no body, no remains of any kind, just an empty space where Emily should have been. For a moment, Karen sat there in stunned silence, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. How could this be possible? They had held a funeral, buried her daughter, mourned her loss. Hadn't they? Then, tucked away in one corner of the coffin, she spotted something glinting faintly in the moonlight. Reaching in, she pulled out a small, metallic box. It was rectangular, about the size of a book, and covered in strange symbols that shimmered as if alive. Karen turned it over in her hands, examining it closely. The craftsmanship was unlike anything she'd ever seen before. Intricate, yet otherworldly. As she studied the box, a sudden jolt of energy surged through her body, causing her to drop it onto the ground. Startled, she scrambled backward, her pulse racing. But before she could react further, a holographic image flickered to life above the box. Karen gasped as the image stabilized, revealing a scene that defied explanation. It showed Emily, alive, and seemingly unharmed, standing in what appeared to be a futuristic laboratory. Surrounding her were tall, slender beings with elongated limbs and glowing eyes. Their features were alien, almost insect-like, yet they moved with an elegance that was both mesmerizing and unsettling. Karen watched, transfixed as the hologram played out. Emily looked different somehow, older, wiser, and wearing clothing that resembled sleek armor made of liquid metal. She interacted with the creatures calmly, almost as if she belonged there. Before Karen could fully comprehend what she was witnessing, the projection vanished, leaving her sitting in stunned silence once again. Her thoughts raced, trying to piece together what she had just seen. Was this some kind of message? A recording? Or something else entirely? Whatever it was, one thing was clear. Emily wasn't dead. And whatever had happened to her involved forces far beyond anything Karen could have imagined. Clutching the mysterious box tightly in her hands, Karen climbed out of the grave, her mind reeling with possibilities. She didn't know what lay ahead, but one thing was certain. She wouldn't rest until she found her daughter and uncovered the truth. As she walked away from the cemetery, the weight of the box pressing against her chest, Karen couldn't help but feel that her journey was only beginning. Karen sat alone in her small, dimly lit kitchen, the mysterious box resting heavily on the wooden table before her. Her hands trembled slightly as she traced its surface with her fingertips, feeling the faint hum of energy that seemed to pulse beneath the metal. The symbols etched into the box shimmered faintly, almost as if they were alive, shifting and changing in ways that made her head spin. She didn't understand what they meant or how the box worked, but one thing was clear. It wasn't human-made. The events of the previous night replayed over and over in her mind like a broken record. The empty grave, the holographic image of Emily surrounded by those strange, otherworldly beings. It all felt surreal, like something out of a science fiction movie. But this wasn't fiction. This was real. And Karen knew deep down that whatever had happened to Emily involved forces far beyond anything she could have imagined. She tried to focus, forcing herself to think logically despite the chaos swirling inside her. What did the box mean? Why had it been buried with Emily? Or rather, where Emily should have been? And most importantly, how could it help her find her daughter? These questions weighed heavily on her, each one more urgent than the last. As she stared at the box, lost in thought, a sudden knock at the door startled her. Her heart skipped a beat as she looked up, her eyes darting toward the sound. Who could possibly be visiting her at this hour? It was late afternoon and she hadn't told anyone about her discovery, not even her closest friends. Cautiously, she rose from her chair and approached the front door. Peering through the peephole, she saw a man standing on her porch. He was tall and lean, wearing a dark coat that flapped gently in the breeze. His face was partially hidden by the brim of his hat, but his posture suggested he was calm. Maybe even patient. Karen hesitated, unsure whether to open the door. Something about him felt off. Finally, curiosity got the better of her, and she cracked the door open just enough to see him clearly. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice steady despite the unease bubbling in her stomach. The man tipped his hat slightly, revealing sharp features and piercing blue eyes. "Mrs. Willis," he said, his tone polite but firm. "My name is Daniel Harper. I need to speak with you about your daughter." Karen's breath hitched. How did this man know about Emily? She tightened her grip on the edge of the door, ready to slam it shut if necessary. "I don't know who you are," she replied cautiously. "What do you want?" Daniel held up his hands in a gesture of peace. "I'm not here to hurt you, Mrs. Willis. In fact, I may be able to help you understand what happened to Emily, but we can't talk out here. May I come in?" Karen hesitated again, weighing her options. Part of her wanted to trust him. After all, he seemed to know something about Emily's disappearance. But another part of her, the part still reeling from the shock of the past 24 hours, was wary of strangers bearing cryptic messages. Finally, she stepped aside, allowing him to enter. "You've got 5 minutes," she said firmly, closing the door behind him. Daniel nodded and followed her into the kitchen. When he saw the box sitting on the table, his expression changed ever so slightly. A flicker of recognition, perhaps, or maybe surprise. Either way, Karen noticed it immediately. "You've seen this before," she accused, pointing at the box. "Who are you, really?" Daniel sighed and pulled out a chair, sitting down without waiting for permission. "Let me start by saying, I work for a private organization," he began slowly. "We investigate anomalies, things that don't fit within our understanding of the world. Things like—" He gestured toward the box. Karen crossed her arms over her chest, her gaze never leaving his face. "Things like my daughter's empty grave?" "Yes," Daniel admitted. "And the circumstances surrounding her supposed death. Officially, the government claims it was an accident during a classified mission. Unofficially—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Unofficially, there's reason to believe your daughter was involved in something much bigger than any of us realized." Karen sank into the chair across from him, her legs suddenly weak. "Bigger how?" she demanded. Daniel leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Decades ago, certain governments, including ours, made agreements with extraterrestrial entities. These agreements allowed them access to advanced technology in exchange for resources." "What kind of resources?" Karen interrupted, her stomach twisting into knots. "People," Daniel said bluntly. "Specifically individuals with qualities deemed valuable by these entities. Intelligence, adaptability, resilience, all traits commonly found in soldiers, like your daughter." Karen's mind raced as she processed his words. "You're telling me aliens took Emily?" "It's possible," Daniel replied. "Based on what you've described about the hologram and the box, it seems likely that Emily was chosen for some kind of experiment. Whether she's still alive or—" He trailed off, unwilling to finish the sentence. Karen shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "No, I saw her. She was alive in that projection. Those creatures, they weren't hurting her. She looked different, yes, but she wasn't afraid." Daniel nodded thoughtfully. "That fits with what we know about these entities. They aren't hostile, at least not in the traditional sense. Their motives are difficult to comprehend because they operate on a level of intelligence far beyond ours. But that doesn't mean interacting with them is without risk." Karen wiped her tears with the back of her hand, her resolve hardening. "So what now? What do I do?" "That depends on you," Daniel said. "If you choose to pursue this, I can guide you. But I must warn you. Once you step down this path, there's no turning back. You'll be exposing yourself to dangers you can't even begin to imagine." Karen glanced at the box, then back at Daniel. "And if I don't pursue it, then you'll spend the rest of your life wondering what happened to your daughter," he said simply. For a long moment, Karen sat in silence, weighing her options. She thought about Emily, the vibrant, determined young woman who had always dreamed of making a difference in the world. She thought about the empty grave, the hologram, and the strange energy emanating from the box. Most of all, she thought about the ache in her heart, the void left by Emily's absence. Finally, she looked up at Daniel, her jaw set with determination. "Tell me what to do next." Daniel smiled faintly, though there was no joy in it. "First, we need to figure out how to activate the box fully. It's a beacon designed to communicate with whoever created it. Once we establish contact, we'll decide our next move." Karen nodded, her hands reaching instinctively for the box. As she touched it again, the same jolt of energy coursed through her body, stronger this time. Instinctively, she pulled away, but Daniel placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It's responding to you," he said. "That's good. It means you're connected to Emily somehow. Now let's see if we can unlock its secrets." Together they began examining the box more closely, studying the symbols and searching for any clues that might reveal its purpose. Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the room in shadows. but neither Karen nor Daniel noticed. They were too focused on unraveling the mystery of the box and finding a way to bring Emily home. As the hours passed, Karen felt a mix of fear and hope building inside her. Fear of what lay ahead, of the unknown dangers lurking in the darkness, and hope that somehow she would be reunited with her daughter. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain. Karen Willis was no longer just a grieving mother. She was a seeker of truth, willing to risk everything for answers. Karen stared at the hologram hovering above the metallic box, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure Daniel could hear it. The image flickered slightly before stabilizing, showing Emily once again. This time, however, the projection was clearer, more detailed. Emily stood in what looked like a vast laboratory filled with advanced technology. Glowing panels lined the walls, and floating devices zipped around the room like mechanical insects. Surrounding her were those same alien beings, their elongated, limbs moving gracefully as they worked on various tasks. Emily seemed calm, almost serene, her expression focused as she interacted with the creatures. She wore sleek armor-like clothing that shimmered faintly, and her hair was pulled back into a tight braid. But there was something different about her too. Her eyes glowed softly, matching the luminescence of the aliens around her. It was subtle, but unmistakable, a sign that she had been changed in some way. "What is this?" Karen whispered, her voice trembling. "What are they doing to her?" Daniel leaned closer, studying the hologram intently. "It's hard to say exactly," he admitted. "But based on what we know about these entities, they're likely conducting experiments. They're fascinated by humanity, our adaptability, our emotions, our resilience. Soldiers like Emily are particularly valuable because of their training and discipline." Karen shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "This isn't right. She didn't sign up for this. She joined the military to serve her country, not to become whatever this is." "I understand how you feel," Daniel said gently. "But you need to remember that Emily isn't just a victim here. Look at her. She's holding her own. She's interacting with them willingly. That suggests she's been given a choice, or at least, she's accepted her situation." "A choice?" Karen snapped, her anger bubbling to the surface. "How can you call this a choice? She's trapped with those things." "Maybe," Daniel replied calmly. "Or maybe she sees an opportunity to do something greater than any of us can imagine. These entities operate on a level we don't fully understand. What looks like captivity to us might actually be collaboration to her." Karen wanted to argue, to scream, to demand answers that made sense. But deep down, she knew Daniel was right. Emily had always been strong-willed, determined, to make a difference no matter the cost. If she believed in what these aliens were doing, if she thought it could help humanity, then she would throw herself into it completely. Still, the thought of her daughter being so far away, surrounded by beings who weren't even human, filled Karen with dread. The hologram shifted suddenly, and the image of Emily disappeared, replaced by a series of symbols and patterns that danced across the air. Some of them matched the engravings on the box, while others were entirely new. "What's happening now?" Karen asked, wiping her tears with the sleeve of her sweater. "It's communicating," Daniel explained. "The box is trying to send a message, or maybe receive one. We need to figure out what it's saying." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small device, placing it on the table next to the box. The device hummed softly as it scanned the hologram, analyzing the symbols and recording the data. "How does that thing work?" Karen asked, eyeing the gadget suspiciously. "It's designed to interpret alien languages," Daniel said. "Not perfectly, of course, but it should give us a general idea of what's being communicated." As the device worked, Karen couldn't help but notice the papers scattered across the table. Star maps, sketches of alien symbols, and notes written in Daniel's neat handwriting hinted at years of research. Whatever organization he worked for, they clearly took their mission seriously. Finally, the device beeped, signaling that it had finished its analysis. Daniel picked it up and studied the screen, his brow furrowing as he processed the information. "Well?" Karen prompted impatiently. It's a set of coordinates, Daniel said slowly. And instructions. The box is directing us to a specific location, a rendezvous point, if you will. A rendezvous point for what? Karen demanded. For contact, Daniel replied. If we go there, we'll have a chance to communicate directly with whoever or whatever is behind this. Karen's stomach churned at the thought. Communicating with aliens sounded like something out of a movie, not real life. But here she was, sitting in her kitchen with a glowing box and a man who claimed to specialize in the unknown. And then what? She asked. Do we just ask them to bring Emily back? It's not that simple, Daniel warned. These entities don't think or act like humans. Even if we manage to establish contact, there's no guarantee they'll cooperate. And if they do, there's no telling what conditions they'll impose. Karen clenched her fists, frustration bubbling inside her. So what's the point? Why even bother? Because it's your only chance, Daniel said bluntly. If you want answers and if you ever hope to see Emily again, you have to take this step. Otherwise, you'll spend the rest of your life wondering what could have been. Karen sighed deeply, running a hand through her messy hair. She hated feeling so powerless, so dependent on someone else to guide her through this nightmare. But Daniel was right. Sitting here wasn't going to bring Emily home. Fine, she said finally. Where is this rendezvous point? Daniel glanced at the device again. About 50 miles outside town. There's an abandoned field near Willow Creek Cemetery. According to the coordinates, that's where we need to go. Karen frowned. Willow Creek again? Why does everything keep leading back there? It's probably significant, Daniel said. Maybe it's a hotspot for extraterrestrial activity. Or maybe it's tied to Emily somehow. Either way, it's where we need to be. They agreed to meet at the location later that night, when the chances of being seen were minimal. As Daniel packed up his equipment and prepared to leave, Karen felt a mix of fear and determination settling over her. Fear of the unknown dangers ahead, and determination to find her daughter no matter the cost. After Daniel left, Karen sat alone in her kitchen, staring at the box. It pulsed faintly, almost as if it were alive, waiting for her next move. She thought about Emily, the brave, selfless young woman who had always put others first. Now Karen had to do the same. For Emily's sake, she had to face whatever came next. As darkness fell over the small town, Karen gathered her courage and prepared to follow the path laid out before her. Whatever waited at the rendezvous point, she was ready, or at least as ready as she could be. The drive to the abandoned field felt endless. Karen sat in the passenger seat of Daniel's car, her hands gripping the edges of the mysterious box tightly. It pulsed faintly against her palms, almost like a heartbeat, keeping time with the rhythm of her own racing pulse. Outside, the world was eerily quiet. No cars on the road, no lights in the distance, just miles of empty countryside stretching out under the pale glow of the moon. Karen glanced at Daniel, who kept his eyes fixed on the road ahead. His expression was calm, but there was a tension in his jaw that betrayed his unease. She wanted to ask him questions, what exactly they were walking into, whether he'd done this before, but she held her tongue. Something told her now wasn't the time for words. When they finally arrived at the field, Karen stepped out of the car and froze. The air was thick with an unnatural stillness, and the hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. Ahead of them, the ground sloped gently downward toward a wide-open expanse of grass, bathed in silver moonlight. And then, without warning, the sky above began to shimmer. At first, it looked like heat waves rippling through the air, but soon a low hum filled the silence, growing louder and deeper until it vibrated through Karen's chest. Then, slowly, impossibly, a spacecraft descended from the heavens. It was unlike anything Karen had ever seen. Sleek and oval-shaped, its surface gleamed with a metallic sheen that reflected the moonlight. Intricate patterns etched into the hull glowed faintly, pulsing in sync with the box in her hands. The ship hovered silently a few feet above the ground, casting a soft blue light over everything below. Karen's breath caught in her throat. For a moment, all she could do was stare, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. And yet here it was, hovering right in front of her. Daniel stepped forward, his voice steady despite the awe written across his face. "Stay close," he said quietly. "Whatever happens, don't run. Don't panic." Karen nodded, though her legs felt like jelly beneath her. Together they walked toward the ship, the box glowing brighter with each step they took. As they approached, a section of the hull slid open, revealing a doorway framed by soft, golden light. "Is this it?" Karen whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the ship. "This is it," Daniel replied. Taking a deep breath, Karen stepped inside, the box clutched tightly to her chest. The interior of the ship was vast and otherworldly, filled with glowing panels and floating orbs that zipped around like fireflies. The walls seemed to shift and change, pulsing with colors that didn't exist on Earth. At the center of the room stood Emily, or rather a version of Emily. Karen froze, tears welling up in her eyes as she stared at her daughter. Emily looked older, stronger, her presence radiating a quiet confidence. Her hair was pulled back into a tight braid, and her armor-like clothing shimmered faintly, matching the glow of the ship around her. But it was her eyes that caught Karen's attention. They glowed softly, filled with a wisdom and understanding that went beyond human experience. "Mom," Emily said, her voice warm but tinged with something unfamiliar. Karen wanted to rush forward, to pull her daughter into her arms and never let go. But something held her back, the weight of the moment, the realization that Emily was no longer entirely human. What happened to you?" Karen asked, her voice breaking. Emily smiled faintly, stepping closer. "I'm okay, Mom. Really. I wasn't hurt. I was chosen." "Chosen for what?" Karen demanded, her emotions bubbling to the surface. "To be experimented on? To be turned into whatever this is?" "No," Emily said firmly. "To help. These beings, they call themselves the Valens. They're studying us, learning about humanity. They believe we have potential, qualities that make us special, and they thought I could help bridge the gap between our species." Karen shook her head, overwhelmed by everything she was hearing. "But why you? Why my daughter?" Emily reached out, placing a hand on Karen's shoulder. The touch was warm, comforting, but also different somehow. "Because I was willing," she said simply. "When they came to me, I saw it as an opportunity. To learn, to grow, to make a difference. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I also knew it was important." Karen looked at Daniel, who stood quietly off to the side, giving them space. "Did you know about this?" she asked accusingly. "I suspected," Daniel admitted, "but I didn't have all the details. Each case is unique, and the Valons don't share much information with outsiders." Karen turned back to Emily, searching her daughter's face for answers. "So what happens now? Are you coming home?" Emily hesitated, her glowing eyes clouding with sadness. "I can't, Mom, not yet. There's still so much work to do here, so much to learn." "But you're alive," Karen insisted. "You're not dead. You don't belong here, you belong with me." "I'll always belong with you," Emily said softly. "But I've found a new purpose, one that's bigger than either of us. That doesn't mean I'll stop being your daughter. It just means I'll be doing it from a different place." Karen felt tears streaming down her face, her heart torn between joy and despair. Joy because her daughter was alive, and despair because she might never see her again. Before she could respond, Emily gestured toward the glowing box in Karen's hands. "That box is a gift," she explained. "It's how we can stay connected, even when we're apart. Through it, you'll be able to communicate with me and maybe someday understand why this is so important." Karen looked down at the box, its faint hum resonating with her heartbeat. She didn't fully understand what it meant or how it worked, but she knew one thing. It was a lifeline to her daughter. As the moments passed, the Valens began to move around them, their elongated limbs and glowing eyes creating an aura of calm, authority. One of them approached Karen, tilting its head slightly as if studying her. Though she couldn't understand its language, she felt a sense of reassurance, a promise that Emily would be safe. Finally, Daniel placed a hand on Karen's shoulder. "We should go," he said gently. "They won't harm her. But staying too long could put you in danger." Reluctantly, Karen nodded, taking one last look at Emily before turning away. As they stepped back outside, the ship began to rise, its golden light fading into the night sky. Standing in the empty field, Karen clutched the box tightly, her mind racing with everything she had seen and heard. Emily was alive. She was safe. And though their lives would never be the same, Karen knew one thing for certain. She would do whatever it took to stay connected to her daughter, no matter where the journey led. Karen sat in the quiet stillness of her home, the metallic box resting on the kitchen table before her. Days had passed since her encounter with the Valens, but the memory of that night lingered vividly in her mind. Emily's glowing eyes, the hum of the spacecraft, the calm yet alien presence of the beings. It all felt like a dream, though Karen knew it was anything but. The box pulsed softly, its faint glow casting shadows across the walls. Karen reached out to touch it, feeling the same jolt of energy she'd experienced before. She didn't fully understand how it worked or what it meant, but one thing was clear. It was her connection to Emily, her lifeline to a world beyond Earth. Daniel had warned her not to tamper with the box too much until they better understood its purpose. But Karen couldn't help herself. Every time she touched it, she felt closer to her daughter. It was as if the box carried a piece of Emily within it, a fragment of her essence that reassured Karen she was still alive, still safe. That evening, Karen decided to test the box again. Following Daniel's instructions, she placed it on the table and focused on calming her breathing. Slowly, she allowed herself to concentrate on the emotions swirling inside her. Her love for Emily, her longing to see her again, her hope for answers. As if responding to her thoughts, the box began to glow brighter. Then, without warning, a hologram flickered to life above it. This time, the image wasn't static. It moved fluidly, showing scenes from what appeared to be Emily's daily life aboard the Valon ship. Karen watched intently as Emily interacted with the aliens, learning their ways and adapting to their environment. There were moments of laughter, moments of intense focus, and moments of quiet reflection. Despite the strangeness of her surroundings, Emily seemed content, even happy. But then the projection shifted, revealing something new. Emily stood in front of a large viewing window, gazing out at the vast expanse of space. Behind her, countless stars twinkled against the black void, each one representing a distant world. Emily turned toward the camera, or whatever device was recording her, and spoke directly to Karen. "Mom," she said, her voice warm and familiar despite the distance between them. "I know this is hard for you to understand, but I want you to know that I'm okay. More than okay, I'm thriving. These beings, they're incredible. They've shown me things I never thought possible, taught me lessons about myself and about humanity that I'll carry with me forever." Tears welled up in Karen's eyes as she listened. Emily's words brought both comfort and heartache, filling her with pride while deepening the ache of missing her daughter. "The Valens believe humans have untapped potential," Emily continued. "They think we can evolve, grow stronger, become something greater, and I believe them too. That's why I've chosen to stay, to help bridge the gap between our species and theirs. Mom, I know it's scary, but trust me when I say this is where I'm meant to be." Karen wanted to argue, to beg Emily to come home. But looking into her daughter's glowing eyes, she realized there was no point. Emily wasn't being forced to stay. She was choosing to. And though it pained Karen to admit it, she respected her daughter's decision. The hologram faded, leaving Karen sitting alone in the dim light of the kitchen. For a long moment, she simply stared at the box, letting Emily's words sink in. The next morning, Karen met Daniel at a cafe on the outskirts of town. He had been keeping tabs on her progress, offering guidance whenever she needed it. As usual, he wore his dark coat, his sharp features softened slightly by the morning sunlight streaming through the windows. "How are you holding up?" he asked, stirring his coffee absent-mindedly. "I don't know," Karen admitted honestly. "It's complicated. Part of me feels like I should fight harder to bring Emily back, but another part of me knows she's exactly where she needs to be." Daniel nodded thoughtfully. "That's understandable. What Emily's doing is extraordinary, not just for her, but for humanity as a whole. If she succeeds, it could change everything. Peaceful coexistence with extraterrestrial life, that's the stuff of legends. But at what cost?" Karen countered. "What if something goes wrong? What if they decide she's expendable?" "That's why we're here," Daniel said firmly, "to make sure nothing happens to her. To monitor the situation and step in if necessary. You're not alone in this, Karen. We'll do everything we can to protect her." Karen appreciated his reassurance, but she couldn't shake the lingering fear in the pit of her stomach. Still, she knew she had to keep moving forward for Emily's sake. Over the following weeks, Karen threw herself into understanding the box and its connection to the Valens. With Daniel's help, she began deciphering the symbols etched into its surface, piecing together fragments of meaning. Each discovery brought her closer to Emily, helping her feel less like an outsider and more like a participant in her daughter's journey. One night, as Karen worked late into the evening, the box activated unexpectedly. Instead of projecting a hologram, it emitted a low-frequency hum that resonated throughout the house. Startled, Karen stepped back, unsure of what was happening. Then, suddenly, the air around her shimmered, and a portal-like opening appeared in the corner of the room. Through it, Karen could see glimpses of the Valen ship, the glowing panels, the floating orbs, the elongated figures moving gracefully. Heart-pounding, Karen hesitated. Was this an invitation? A test? Or something else entirely? Summoning every ounce of courage, she stepped through the portal. On the other side, she found herself standing in the same futuristic chamber she'd seen in the holograms. Emily was there, waiting for her, her expression lighting up with joy. "Mom." "Emily," exclaimed, rushing forward to embrace her. For the first time in months, Karen felt truly at peace. Holding her daughter close, she realized that though their lives had changed forever, their bond remained unbroken. "You're amazing," Karen whispered, pulling back to look at Emily. "I'm so proud of you." Emily smiled, her glowing eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you for trusting me, Mom. That means everything." As they talked, the Valens observed quietly, their presence both comforting and awe-inspiring. Karen felt a newfound respect for these beings, for their intelligence, their curiosity, and their willingness to share their knowledge with humanity. When it was time to leave, Emily walked Karen back to the portal. "This isn't goodbye," Emily promised. "We'll always find ways to stay connected." Karen nodded, tears streaming down her face as she stepped through the opening. Back in her kitchen, she looked down at the box, now glowing softly once more. Though the road ahead would be challenging, Karen knew one thing for certain. She would face it with courage, just as Emily had. Together, they would navigate this strange new chapter of their lives, one step at a time. Karen stood at the threshold of the glowing portal, her heart pounding as she looked back and forth between her daughter and the familiar surroundings of her kitchen. It was surreal. On one side, the life she had always known, filled with ordinary worries and simple joys. On the other, a world beyond imagination where humanity's future might hang in the balance. She knew this moment would define everything that came after. Emily smiled gently, her glowing eyes filled with reassurance. "You don't have to decide right now," she said softly. "But if you're ready, there's so much more I want to show you." Karen hesitated, her mind racing. She thought about her life on Earth, the quiet mornings sipping coffee, the evenings spent reading by the fire, the routines that had kept her grounded through years of loneliness after Emily left for the military. Those moments were precious, yes, but they felt hollow without her daughter. And now, here was Emily, alive and thriving in a place Karen could barely comprehend. Taking a deep breath, Karen nodded. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll come." Emily's smile widened, and she reached out her hand. Karen stepped forward, leaving behind the safety of her home and stepping into the unknown. As she crossed through the portal, the air around her shifted, tingling against her skin like static electricity. The kitchen disappeared, replaced by the sleek, futuristic chamber aboard the Valon ship. The room hummed with energy, its glowing panels casting soft light over everything. Floating orbs zipped past, their movements precise and purposeful. The Valon stood nearby, observing silently, their elongated forms exuding an aura of calm authority. One of them tilted its head slightly, studying Karen with curiosity. "This is incredible," Karen murmured, looking around in awe. Despite her fear, she couldn't help but feel a sense of wonder. Everything here was so advanced, so far beyond anything humans had achieved. Yet amidst all the strangeness, she felt oddly at peace. Emily guided Karen to a viewing window that stretched across one wall of the chamber. Beyond it lay the vast expanse of space, dotted with countless stars and swirling galaxies. It was breathtaking, almost too beautiful to be real. "Do you see why I stayed?" Emily asked, her voice filled with emotion. "This isn't just about me, it's about what we can learn, what we can become. These beings, they've shown me things I never dreamed possible. They believe in us, Mom. They think we're worth saving, worth evolving." Karen nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on the endless void outside the window. For the first time, she began to understand why Emily had chosen this path. It wasn't just about sacrifice or duty. It was about hope. Hope for a better future. Not just for humanity, but for all living beings. Over the next few days, or what felt like days, though time seemed to flow differently aboard the ship, Karen immersed herself in the Valon's world. With Emily by her side, she explored the ship, learning about its technology and the beings who called it home. The Valons communicated not with words, but with emotions and images projected directly into her mind. At first, it was overwhelming, but gradually, Karen began to grasp their messages. Through these exchanges, she learned that the Valons saw humanity as a species on the brink of transformation. Their experiments weren't meant to harm, but to unlock potential, to help humans adapt and grow in ways that would allow them to coexist peacefully with other intelligent life forms. Karen also discovered that Emily played a crucial role in this process. Her resilience, courage, and ability to connect with others made her uniquely suited to bridge the gap between humans and Valons. Watching her daughter interact with the aliens, Karen felt a surge of pride. Emily wasn't just surviving, she was thriving, embracing her new role with grace and determination. But even as Karen marveled at the wonders around her, she couldn't ignore the sacrifices involved. Life aboard the ship was vastly different from anything she'd ever known. There were no sunsets, no fresh air, no familiar comforts. Everything was foreign, challenging, and sometimes frightening. Yet, despite these challenges, Karen found herself growing stronger, adapting in ways she hadn't thought possible. One evening, as she sat with Emily in a quiet corner of the ship, Karen voiced the question that had been weighing on her mind. "What happens next for us, I mean? Do we stay here forever?" Emily shook her head. "Not necessarily. The Valons believe in balance. They don't want to take us away from our roots completely. Eventually, we'll find a way to merge our two worlds, to bring the lessons we've learned back to Earth." Karen frowned, trying to picture such a future. "And until then?" "Until then," Emily said with a smile, "we keep learning, keep growing, together." As the days turned into weeks, Karen became more comfortable aboard the ship. She worked, alongside Emily and the Valons, contributing whatever skills she could offer. Though she missed Earth, she found solace in knowing she was part of something greater than herself. Back on Earth, rumors spread about strange lights in the sky near Willow Creek Cemetery. Some claimed to have seen a glowing object hovering above the abandoned field where Karen and Daniel had waited for the Valon ship. Others reported hearing faint hums and seeing shadowy figures moving among the graves. Daniel kept watch over the area, ensuring no one stumbled upon the truth before humanity was ready. He often thought about Karen, wondering how she was adjusting to her new life. Though he missed her presence, he took comfort in knowing she was exactly where she needed to be. For Karen, the journey was far from over. Each day brought new discoveries, new challenges and new opportunities to grow. But through it all, she held on to one constant: her love for Emily. No matter how far they traveled or how much they changed, that bond remained unbreakable. As the ship prepared to leave orbit and venture deeper into space, Karen stood beside Emily, gazing out at the stars. "We've come so far already," Karen said quietly, "and yet it feels like we're just getting started." Emily nodded, her glowing eyes reflecting the infinite possibilities ahead. "We are," she replied, "but we'll face it together, always." With those words, the ship accelerated, disappearing into the vastness of the cosmos. Though Karen didn't know what lay ahead, she faced it with courage, driven by the hope of a brighter future, for herself, for Emily, and for all of humanity. And somewhere, deep within her heart, she knew that this was only the beginning.